The movie begins with a man narrating how small and lonely he feels in his apartment. He talks about how they should give all they have so that the apartments can provide convenience and a healthy lifestyle. A woman on television states how people talk about the apartment's convenience. People are getting lotteries for places to live. So many apartments are being built and available for both sale and rent. We see the beautiful apartments before an explosion wipes them out. A young man, Min Sung, wakes up and goes to his window to see the whole city in ruins with only his apartment building standing still. He goes to the reception floor to find people whose houses have collapsed, gathering and asking about the apartment's safety. He went back and started counting how many supplies they had with his wife, Myung-hwa, and how long it lasted. She suggests that they go to her father's house, but Min-seong tells her that it's too dangerous to move and they'll have to wait for a rescue team to come. A woman from across the street knocks on their door and begs that they let her son sleep there as he is very cold. When Min-seong is about to close the door on her, she offers her expensive item before they let her in. Min-seong goes downstairs to buy supplies. Many people are staying there, and he goes to a man who sells all kinds of stuff. When Min-seong offers him cash, he shows him a sign that says he will only accept lighters, gas, and water. Another man came behind him and gave out batteries for a can of drink. Seeing this, Min-seong gives up his watch to the seller. As he was heading up to his place, he ran into a group of people, throwing out a thief and dropping his can through the commotion. He goes over to get it under a couch, and soon the place is filled with big cockroaches. In their apartment, Hyewon is playing with the kid they let stay with them. Min-seong got in and went to a room to eat what he bought. Hyewon joins him and asks to share it with the woman and her son, but he insists they have it for themselves. They hugged, enjoying the food, as the lady stood by the door and asked to make soup for dinner. Soon the kid was eating the leftovers from them as Min-seong complained about them being shameless. Hyewon tries to convince him that it is okay that they share food with them as they are walking into the building. Inside the building, there is a commotion as a man is stabbed and thrown out of his home. Hyewon goes over to help him when she sees him bleeding. Soon the people gathered saw smoke from inside the house. The people started screaming and leaving before the place blew up. A man named Young-tak rushed into the house to help put out the fire. When the fire extinguisher he took in wasn't enough, he went over to a water tank that was frozen. He used all his power to make it work. They put out the fire with the help of Min-seong. Once they were outside, Young-tak was approached by the head of the Women's Council, Jun-ae. She thanked him for his bravery as he told her that he couldn't let the building collapse. She learns that he lives on the 9th floor and is a son of an old lady. Soon the tenants of the building gathered and talked about what happened to the guy who got stabbed. Gwen-ae brings oranges and gives one to each person. Then they start discussing the outsiders, making sure that only the residents are in the meeting. One of the tenants says that his family moved into the building 3 weeks ago. He says that the outsiders need to be evicted as the people living in the building have sacrificed a lot to get here. Another man from the tenants interrupts him and says that by evicting them in this weather, they're deciding on them to die. The wife of the man who said to evict them tries to compromise, saying that they should let the outsiders stay until the rescue team shows up, but soon a banter arises and all the tenants start arguing before Gen-ai gets up and stops them. She tells them that all the outsiders are from the Dream Palace. They used to look down on the tenants before the building collapsed, and it's assumed that they would have done the same too. Hyewon suggests that maybe they could all live together, but Gwen-ae dismisses it before she asks Min-seong what he thinks of all this as he is a public servant. He calmly replies that they will need to build a system to pull their strengths and delegate a leader. The tenants agree and say that it should be the one who lived here the longest, but those people were very old. Some suggest that women are stronger in crisis, but Gwen-ai stops and tells them that they need someone willing to sacrifice himself for them. Then they all voted and chose Young-tak as their provisional resident delegate. After making a short and awkward speech in front of them, Young-tak signed a paper. To make voting easier on the eviction of the outsiders, they set up white and black stones. Young-tak and Gwen-ai show the tenants how the voting will take place. Gwen-ai reads their names as the people go in and vote. Finally, they took the stones out of the boots. The white stones are greater in number than the black ones, meaning that the majority of them chose to evict the outsiders. Later that evening, Min-sung mentioned to Myung-hwa that he suspected the outsiders had a plan, but she remained doubtful and couldn't shake her uncertainty. Despite her skepticism, Min-sung did his best to comfort her. After a pause, Myung-hwa asked Min-sung about the color he had chosen, but he quickly avoided answering, reminding her that they were strictly instructed not to share that information, even with their spouses. Just then, their child asked for her help to get to the bathroom. As Myung-hwa stepped away, Min-sung took the opportunity to examine his wounds. Staring at his hands, his mind drifted back to the moments before the earthquake struck their home, the memories flooding back in vivid flashes. Min-sung had been downtown, in the area that was hit first, helping a group of men trying to push a truck to free a woman trapped inside. But as the destruction grew nearer, panic set in, and everyone scattered. Left alone, Min-sung took refuge inside a nearby car and watched helplessly as the woman perished. His own vehicle was tossed around in the chaos, but he survived thanks to his seatbelt. The following day, Young-tak approached Min-sung, asking him to take charge of the anti-crime task force, citing his experience in military service. Later on, Young-tak and Gyeomai gathered all the newly appointed task force leaders, each with military training. During the meeting, one man suggested that only property owners, not renters, should serve as leaders. Gyeomai quickly dismissed this, pointing out that in their current situation, with no banks or money, everyone was on equal footing. They all agreed to meet at dawn, armed for protection in case any outsiders resisted, but they emphasized that no one should be killed. Suddenly, Do-kyun announced he was stepping down, citing health issues, which sparked judgment from the rest of the group. Afterward, Min-sung retrieves a metal bar from his wardrobe, intending to use it as a weapon, which immediately raises concern for Myung-hwa. As dawn approaches, Young-tak checks on his mother before heading out to join the task force. Gyeomai announces the plan to clear out empty spaces and force the outsiders to leave the building. Myung-hwa is left behind to say her goodbyes to the elderly woman and their child. Once all the outsiders are gathered outside, the task force emerges with fences in hand. Young-tak firmly tells the outsiders that they can no longer stay in the building. Protests erupted almost immediately, with many outsiders pointing out that the freezing temperatures outside would be deadly, especially when there are vacant apartments inside. Amid the chaos, it's revealed that the district's congressman is among the crowd. He tries to make a speech to calm things down, but Young-tak, unimpressed by his authority, shows no hesitation in kicking him out as well. An outsider calls out Young-tak for disrespecting the government, urging the crowd to force their way back inside. What follows is pure chaos. The outsiders push so hard that the glass doors shatter, and the task force struggles to hold them back. A few outsiders manage to attack, but after a fierce struggle, the task force regains control. Reinforcements from the apartments arrive, and they eventually manage to push the outsiders back using the fences. Young-tak is injured during the scuffle, his face bloodied, but he continues to shout at the crowd, his appearance striking fear into the outsiders. At that point, some of the residents begin throwing rocks from their windows, and the outsiders, realizing they are outmatched, retreat. The residents cheer, celebrating their victory, but Myung-hwa stands apart, deeply unsettled by the violent turn of events. In the days that followed, the residents banded together to repair the damages to the building and pooled their supplies for the greater good. They also erected a gate around the complex to prevent anyone from entering their territory. Gyeom-i set forth a series of strict rules. Only residents were allowed to stay within the building, and no one could come and go freely to avoid unnecessary risk. Fires were prohibited and rations were distributed based on each person's contributions to ensure that everyone pulled their weight. With the water shortage, personal hygiene became a challenge, and the residents were forced to collect their waste in bags and dispose of it in a pit dug outside. Multiple task forces were organized to maintain order and efficiency. The anti-crime task force was responsible for patrolling the complex and keeping the peace, allowing any male over the age of 16 to join. The rations force handled the fair distribution of supplies, while the maintenance force focused on repairs. A medical team was also formed to care for the injured. Despite the hardships, there was a sense of satisfaction among the residents as they worked together to improve their living conditions. However, as supplies began to run dangerously low, Min-sung and a small group of men ventured beyond the complex in search of food. As they ventured deeper into the ruins of the city, the devastation around them became more apparent, with bodies scattered across the streets, including the congressman they had kicked out days earlier. Suddenly, the residents witness an explosion in the distance, but Min Sung's group manages to return safely. They've brought back some food, though most of it is moldy and barely edible. From that day onward, Min Sung and his team left daily, searching every building marked on their map. One time, they find a complex still standing, but inside are only bodies, grim evidence of human violence. Though they occasionally manage to bring back some food, it's never enough, and the shortage of supplies remains a constant struggle. One night, while they are out scavenging, Min Sung and Young Tak sit together, watching yet another explosion on the horizon. During their conversation, Min Sung reflects on the suffering they've endured and expresses hope that they'll eventually be rewarded for their hardships. He also opens up about a personal tragedy, revealing that Myung-hwa had a miscarriage the previous year, which explains her intense need to protect the child. Back at the complex, Myung-hwa is startled when she sees the kid on a neighboring balcony, still holding his walkie-talkie. Panicking, she rushes to her walkie-talkie and contacts him, only to find out that Do-kyun has been hiding the boy and his mother in his apartment all along. Meanwhile, Min Sung and the scavenging team stumble upon a tunnel that leads them to a new area where they discover a grocery store. However, when they try to enter, the store's owner emerges, armed and ready to defend his goods, ordering them to leave. While Young Tak attempts to reason with the man, Min Sung sneaks up behind him and strikes. In the chaos, the man's gun goes off, hitting one of the task force members. The team quickly disarms the owner, and a furious Young Tak beats him mercilessly. Afterward, the group raids the store, taking not only the food but also the dogs. As they leave, Min Sung notices two children crying beside their father's body. Nearby, a group of survivors quietly discuss rumors of a paradise complex, but when they spot Min Sung's team, they scatter in fear. Later, the residents hold a special outdoor celebration to ring in the new year, though Myung-hwa has her doubts about the timing. During the party, two residents are startled when they see a figure approaching in the dark. It turns out to be a woman named Hye-won, who used to live in the complex with her parents. She had left with her mother after discovering her father had been unfaithful. Her old apartment was next to Young Tak's, but she doesn't seem to remember him. After verifying her story, the residents warmly welcome Hye-won back into the community. The New Year's celebration continues with karaoke, powered by the generator set up for the event. As Young Tak sings, he is troubled by the fact that Hye-won doesn't recognize him. A flashback reveals why. His real name is Se-beom, and he used to be a taxi driver. Before the earthquake, Se-beom had broken into the apartment of the real Young Tak, a man involved in scamming people, including Se-beom himself. Se-beom had gone there demanding his money back, but when Young Tak refused, a violent altercation broke out. Though Young Tak managed to stab Se-beom, Se-beom overpowered him and ultimately killed him by shoving stones into his mouth, while Young Tak's mother had a seizure in the background. Just then, Se-beom received a call from his wife and daughter, who were furious because debt collectors had come to seize everything they owned. At that moment, the earthquake struck, and with his wife's hatred of him still fresh, Se-beom chose to stay behind and assumed Young Tak's identity amidst the chaos. Sometime later, as the residents gather to collect their weekly rations, tensions boil over. The portions are meager, barely enough to survive on, and frustration erupts when it's revealed that the anti-crime force receives more food than the rest. A man steps forward, revealing a scar he got while working on building repairs, and angrily calls out the unfairness. He even accuses the anti-crime force of being murderers, a comment that catches Myung-hwa's attention. Gyumei quickly shuts down the argument, telling the dissenters that if they're unhappy, they are free to leave. Later, in the privacy of their home, Myung-hwa confronts Min Sung, asking if he has ever killed anyone. Min Sung admits there was a violent incident, but insists the man didn't die. Still, Myung-hwa is revolted by the idea of such brutality and begs him to stop participating assisting in the search missions. In secret, Myung-hwa begins to take some of her extra supplies to Do-kyun, aiding the outsiders he's been hiding in his apartment. At the same time, Young-tak pays a visit to Hye-won under the pretense of delivering a heater. While there, he questions her about his mother, and when she confirms that she knows her, Young-tak suddenly corners her against the wall. His voice is dark and threatening. He asks if she remembers him now. Sensing danger, Hye-won lies, saying she does it just to protect herself. Hye-won sat quietly as Myung-hwa treated the wound on her arm, her face tense with frustration. When asked about the situation outside, she made it clear that things were dire. The mention of a rumored group near the station sparked a few hopeful remarks from the other women in the room. However, Hye-won, unable to stay silent, expressed her disbelief at their sheltered optimism, reminding them of the grim reality they were choosing to ignore, the hundreds of bodies lying just beyond their sanctuary. Her bluntness provoked a backlash. The woman, offended by her words, accused her of taking advantage of the community's efforts, having arrived later than the others. Harsh comments about her father followed, deepening the sting. Unable to take any more, Hye-won abruptly left the room, her steps heavy with anger. Myung-hwa followed, sensing the hurt beneath her frustration. Outside, Hye-won's anger flared again, remarking on the hypocrisy within the community, where some were favored and others, like her, were treated as outsiders despite their shared struggles. Before their conversation could continue, a distant scream cut through the air, pulling their attention elsewhere. A crowd had gathered, and the scene before them was grim. A resident's body lay lifeless, brutally slain by outsiders after attempting to leave the safety of the complex. Nearby, a bloodied message on the wall left little room for doubt about the attacker's intentions, a warning that their time for vengeance was coming. The sight of the resident's body reminded Young-tak of the day he found his daughter's lifeless form in the city's ruins. Without hesitation, he declared that stricter controls would be implemented. From then on, no one would leave the complex without approval, and the number of guards would be increased to prevent further breaches. Later that evening, Young-tak visited Do-kyun's apartment, commenting on the amount of furniture and suggesting it could be used for firewood. His search turned invasive as he opened drawers, rummaged through the wardrobe, and even lifted the mattress, exposing the mother and child who had been hiding underneath. Without mercy, Young-tak evicted them and publicly punished Do-kyun for breaking the rules. The other residents stood by, watching the scene unfold in silence. Afterward, Young-tak informed Min-sung that his wife had been involved. Back home, Min-sung scolded Myung-hwa, warning her that she had put their family in danger. Disgusted, Myung-hwa voiced her suspicions, stating that Young-tak wasn't truly a resident, but without evidence, Min-sung refused to believe her. Determined to make things right, Min-sung sought out Young-tak, dropping to his knees in apology. In response, Young-tak coldly told him to work harder, leaving Min-sung with no choice but to comply. The following day, the anti-crime force ramped up their efforts, becoming more stringent than ever. They systematically visited every apartment, searching for any outsiders. If they discovered anyone who wasn't supposed to be there, they were immediately thrown out, and the apartment's door was marked with a red paint symbol, branding it as a place that had broken the rules. Myung-hwa attempted to secretly bring medicine to Do-kyun, but he refused, not wanting to risk further trouble. Once the purge was complete, Young-tak forced those who had broken the rules to kneel and apologize repeatedly, proudly proclaiming that the building was now occupied only by true residents. The atmosphere of control and fear was shattered when the sound of shouting suddenly filled the air. The residents turned to see Do-kyun standing on the balcony, his voice carrying over the courtyard as he declared that everything was wrong. Moments later, to everyone's horror, he plunged to his death. Later, as the residents gathered to burn his body, a small earthquake struck, causing a nearby building to collapse. In its wake, a large water tank broke, finally supplying them with much-needed water. Amid the celebrations, Myung-hwa took the opportunity to approach Hye-won, seeking more information about Young-tak. Hye-won revealed that before she moved away, she had once mistakenly received a package meant for her neighbor, the real Young-tak. Soon after, Ai informed Young-tak that while they now had water, their food supplies were nearly depleted. In response, Young-tak announced the formation of a new group to go out and scavenge for food. Myung-hwa and Hye-won seized the moment, using the distraction to break into Young-tak's apartment by making a hole in the wall from Hye-won's side. They searched the apartment thoroughly, but found nothing suspicious. Young-tak had disposed of any evidence. Desperate, they asked the old woman living nearby, but she was clueless about the situation. Just as they were about to give up, Hye-won noticed something strange about the washing machine. It was sealed tightly. Upon prying it open, they were horrified to discover the real Young-tak's body hidden inside, and the grim truth was finally revealed. Meanwhile, the scavenging group ventures farther than they ever had before, eventually stumbling upon a destroyed food court. The only way inside is through a narrow tunnel packed with bodies. Despite the gruesome sight, Min-sung volunteers to crawl through. Fighting his revulsion as he squeezes past the corpses, he is momentarily startled when he thinks he sees a hand move, but he steels himself and presses on. After reaching the end, he breaks through some glass and is overjoyed to discover a storeroom packed with food. The group quickly gets to work, loading up supplies. As they prepare to leave, Min-sung notices a hair clip on the ground and grabs it, thinking it would be a nice gift for his wife. Suddenly, pieces of flaming debris begin to rain down around them. In a frantic rush for cover, one of the group members is tragically struck and killed. Once the debris shower subsides, the remaining members of the team return to the complex, bringing both the food and the fallen member's body with them. When they arrive, Ai is devastated to see her son among the dead. Overcome with grief and anger, she slaps Young-tak, furious that he failed to protect her son as he had promised. The tense moment is broken when Hye-won steps forward, revealing the real Young-tak's ID. With the help of some residents, she brings out the washing machine containing the body. The sight sends the community into a panic, and people begin shouting, demanding answers. Faced with the growing outrage, Young-tak finally snaps. He defends himself, claiming he sacrificed everything for the survival of the complex, and that none of them would still be alive without him. He even points out that he was scammed, arguing that the apartment should rightfully belong to him, but no one sides with him, and Gumei shouts at him again, her fury inciting the rest of the residents to join in. The crowd, now a mob, begins to push and shove Young-tak, forcing him toward the exit. In a desperate attempt to escape, Young-tak breaks free from the crowd and charges at Hye-won, shoving her into the pit filled with excrement. Min-sung suddenly appears holding a weapon, but he hesitates to use it, allowing Young-tak to easily disarm him. As this happens, the gate starts to collapse, and the outsiders finally break through to seek their revenge, while many people stay to fight, including Young-tak, who begins firing at anyone in sight. Most of the residents flee in panic. Min-sung and Myung-hwa retreat to their apartment to hide, but an intruder follows them in, severely injuring Min-sung. Myung-hwa rushes to protect him and nearly loses her life, but Min-sung manages to regain his strength and kills the attacker, saving her. The couple then leaves their apartment, witnessing the chaos unfolding outside. They decide to escape the complex, but just as they do, someone hurls a bomb at the building. Young-tak attempts to kick it away, but the explosion still takes place above them, killing dozens. Young-tak is gravely wounded, yet somehow makes it back to his apartment, only to collapse and die shortly after reaching the door. A group of looters enters soon after to steal whatever they can, and eventually, most of the residents abandon the complex. Meanwhile, Min-sung and Myung-hwa find refuge in a ruined apartment for the night as the rain begins to pour. Min-sung is in terrible pain, but Myung-hwa lacks the medical supplies needed to treat him. The next day, they continue walking, ignoring other survivors they pass until night falls again. This time, they take shelter in a destroyed church. Before they rest, Min-sung hands Myung-hwa a hair clip and expresses how happy he is to have married her. The following morning, Myung-hwa wakes up to a beautiful light shining through the windows. But her heart breaks as she realizes Min-sung has passed away during the night. She cries uncontrollably. Just then, a group of survivors finds her and invites her to join them. Myung-hwa is taken to the station Hye-won mentioned, where she is surprised by how welcoming the people are. They offer her food and a place to stay without question. Outside, she notices food being distributed equally among everyone, showing that even in the worst times, people can choose kindness. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.